Her story deals with a subculture of heavy metal music that some feel is sending a dangerous message to your kids.
The forces of evil on the dark side of devil right.
And I want to talk tonight about the devil and demons and witches and wizards.
And we just mix it up with hardcore and aggression and come out with something we think's an original sound.
Loud, fast, heavy, you know.
Well, what do you got?
What do you got?
You're listening to Riff Worship, the podcast that attempts to answer the age-old question, what makes a riff? Why do we care about the riff? Talking about our favorite albums containing our favorite riffs. I'm one of your hosts, Austin Paulson. With me again for another week is your other host, Justin Swindle, Dylan Adams, my two pals in music and riff stuff. Riffing. So many riffing. I'm riffing currently on this intro.
Right. Yeah.
How are you guys doing?
I'm doing great. Life is peachy. Like Korn said.
Like Korn said.
Yes.
Shut up.
Yes.
I didn't realize Will Cronenberg was here.
I am so happy you did that. I am just enthralled because it's a really good tie-in actually with what we're talking about today.
Yeah, a little bit.
So, Swindle, glad you're doing well. I'm here. I'm bald. I'm beautiful. I'm back again. So I have this fancy light that's staring me right in the face. That is. I'm going to mess around with the strobes a little bit through this episode, so just get over it.
And you're going to have to like cycle through it again.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a long episode.
Yeah.
The Christmas episode is going to be rad.
Oh, geez. Just don't give anyone a seizure.
Put a warning like before the that episode of Pokemon.
Oh, absolutely. Which one was that?
They actually don't show it.
That's probably fair. Yeah.
So what are we talking about today?
Oh, yeah, The Thing, right? We're talking about an EP. We've been kind of doing a couple episodes of like, I don't know, I guess the Coalesce album is it? Well, it's an album, right? But it's like, what, 30 minutes, give or take?
23
less than
minutes.
that, 23.
Yeah.
And then we did a record, an EP that only featured one song. This is an EP, if you could call it that. Dylan, I think, what is it, like 30 odd
It's
minutes?
just over 30 minutes long. EP. Like this is
EP.
longer than Rain and Blood.
That's wild. And, you know, you think of records now that are about the same, you know, like a full length record is probably
30 to 40.
Yeah, exactly. So interesting. We're talking about Jar of Flies, Alice in Chains, from 1994, just months before a child was born into this world. A great,
Oh my
a
God.
great one. It's crazy.
Jesus.
We're coming up on 30 years of this record.
Yep.
You know, almost.
Are you not
Just
going to
a
say
few
what?
weeks.
I
Are
already
you not
said.
going to say what child?
Oh, it's me. I'm him. I'm the child.
Is this like the beginning of Disney's Hercules? Are we going to have like all the different like gods and goddesses come out and start singing songs about you?
I just remember, if anybody can talk about this year, it's this record, and then the birth of Austin W.
And on that day and at that minute, you just heard a plethora from the city of Chicago of just these old style tabs clipping open.
The suburbs.
Just hot dogs hitting the grill.
Just a stench of onions.
We've definitely had conversations off camera about albums. Do they actually have riffs or do they not? So I'm stubborn enough to disagree with anybody upon anything. I think that is very well known. If someone says there's no riff on here, I'm like, yeah, there's bass riffs all over it. And there are. However, I'm going to enter this into like the riff worship lore. If the band is known for creating any sort of album that is known for riffs, i.e. this band's prior effort, Dirt, or anything thereafter, anything that this band has done has riffs all over it. They are allowed to be included into the riff worship kind of territory of, is it a riff, is it not? If they do put something out that may or may not be classified as, does it have a riff or not?
I agree with you. I think maybe you compare this to Dirt. Obviously, there's like a clear difference, you know, as far as like riffs go. It's not like Dirt's in your face. Like Dirt has, it's all riffs. It's just one of the best hard rock metal-esque record, one of the best out there. No denying that. And you get to this record and maybe they're not like as, it's more subtle, I think.
Yep.
Like you said, there's definitely bass riffs on this thing. I think.
Yeah. This definitely plays like, this plays almost like a soundscape in a weird way.
Yes.
Because they're songs, right? There's no definitive riff in each thing. It was all just these basic structured songs, chord progressions, that sort of thing. And we're going to get into how that happened and why that happened that way. But there's still enough of a comparison to the whole Alice in Chains catalog to go like, oh yeah, that's Alice in Chains. Like there's, Jerry Cantrell's like throwing these down-tuned fucking riffs in there somehow, these layered guitar harmonies all over it. So like it's still there. I still give it a pass. Black Sabbath had Changes, which is piano driven. There are many bands that had different songs that didn't have any riffs on it that are on a riff heavy album.
It shows the band's range. Like they're not just, they can be the hard rock metal loving Alice in Chains that, we have enjoyed for years, but then they can also write acoustic passages, a whole acoustic EP. They'd kind of done this before. Yeah. They did this with Sap in 92.
What's the single off of Sap? What was the big hit off of that record?
Got Me Wrong.
Okay. That's right.
Had you listened to Sap? I don't know what your guys' first like introduction to Alice in Chains would have been, but was it this? Was it Dirt? Was it something else?
Swindle, you go first.
I was cognizant of music when they were on like alternative rock radio. My parents like listened to alternative rock radio in the 90s, and so I like knew Man in the Box and Rooster and shit like that. I think my dad at one point bought one of the greatest hits.
Best of the Box?
Yeah. Best of the Box.
The orange one?
Hits. Yeah.
Austin, what was I know you asked the question, but what was your first introduction?
I think I'm pretty similar. I think, this is just one of those bands, probably by the time that I became very obsessed with this kind of world of music, that they're just ingrained in rock radio and, the music videos are, I can remember going to like a hard rock cafe and they just, Rooster is like on the thing or whatever. They have the, probably Jerry Cantrell's like guitar on the wall or whatever. So the band was like, maybe if I didn't even notice it, they were just kind of always there. And then you kind of get in somehow. I know we talked about, briefly talked about Alice in Chains in a previous episode when they're on the Clash of the Titans tour. So I think even becoming more knowledgeable of metal and aggressive music, you're going to clash with Alice in Chains in some capacity. And so, yeah, Dirt, amazing record. You really can't, what hasn't been said about that record? We probably could have done an episode on that, but.
Oh, that record will happen.
This was just kind of a little bit more interesting to me. There's definitely been, articles written and, things filmed about this, this era of the band and recording this. So, but it just, I think seasonally it works. This
seasonal
is kind of
depression.
Seasonal depression.
Yep. Kicks right in.
It's the perfect record for right now, or at least you could just kind of stare longingly out a window. Just have this in the background.
My introduction was kind of similar. My dad used to come and pick me up to go to his house over the summers. And he was the first person I ever met that had XM radio. I couldn't remember what the station was called. It was whatever hard rock station was there. I know there were a handful of them. Maybe this was just centric in 90s music, but it was playing through. He was listening to it, and Grind came on, which comes off the self-titled record. I heard Grind, and I heard that big opening kind of dirge riff it's got. And my ears perked, because at that point I had heard Nirvana by that point, and maybe had heard, oh man, maybe Pearl Jam. I'm sure maybe those two in particular. But my ears perked up and I said, hey, do you have the Alice in Chains album with that song on it? And my dad, of course, goes, yeah, of course I've got it. He was wrong. He had the Unplugged edition, which is great record, not really what I was looking for. Obviously, that had songs from this album or this EP on it. This had it had quite a few of the tracks on it, Nutshell in particular. But I believe that summer I went and bought Best of the Box. And so I got a little bit of exposure to that. Obviously, I'd heard Man in the Box. And I think the song that stuck out to me the most from this band before I really dove into the catalog was a song on that compilation called Get Born Again. That is made just for that compilation. That is, I think, one of the last things Lane Staley did with the band.
Yeah.
One of the last couple tracks. And it is heavy. Like it is like got one of the heaviest right-handed riffs I've ever heard.
Is that the first song?
It is. It's the opening track on that compilation.
I know we'll get into it probably later, but I think it should be said that, even though this band is very well known for having Lane Staley in this era, these releases, people should definitely check out modern Alice in Chains. I think we've talked about it a lot over the years, that some of the best riffs that come from the past few records that they've done. Like the Devil Put Dinosaurs Here. What's the Blue record?
Is it Black Leads Way to Blue or something like that?
That sounds right.
And then their most recent album,
Rainier Fog.
That's it, Rainier Fog. Those are really good records. It ultimately shows that, yes, Lane Staley was the singer of the band, and not to take away from his credentials of the band, but I would definitely hedge a bet to say that this band wouldn't exist without Jerry Cantrell at all. Hell, you may hear Lane Staley up front, but you wouldn't have the impact of the songs without Jerry Cantrell's harmonies under there. And Jerry sounds almost eerily like Lane Staley. Like their tonality works really well together.
Yeah, and you hear it all over this record too. I mean, there are songs where
Jerry
takes the forefront. Yeah, exactly. Let's get into it a little bit. Obviously this is the second acoustic EP.
Right.
They've had 3 EPs. We Die Young in 1990. You'd had Sap in 92, and then this record. It is, of course, this was a follow-up to Dirt, which was a huge record. Just massive record for the band. I think it peaked at number 6 on the Billboard 200 chart.
5 times platinum.
Yeah, I think by this time it's a crazy record. It's their highest selling album to date. And so they went on tour, as a band does, in order to support the record or promote the record. They went on tour with Ozzy for his No More tours, which of course we all know that didn't last. And so that's when they get into Mike Inez, which is great, which definitely comes up here in a little bit. They are basically touring through 92 and 93. They fired their original bassist, Mike Starr, during the tour in early 93. There's just problems with substance abuse, I believe, with Mike, and that, that's history. Now, having toured with Ozzy, Mike Inez was just a great fit. They brought him on for the tour, and then he became a full-time member.
So funny thing about Mike Inez, just a little bit of tidbit. Mike was originally recorded, I believe, the bass tracks for No More Tears. I believe he recorded it for the album. Geezer joined the band, and I believe Geezer re-recorded the tracks. So a little bit of a
he does get credit on some of that stuff. He does. Though. I think he does,
sure does,
like a writing credit on at least maybe 1 or 2 tracks off of that record. But yeah, I believe that. I've heard that as well. That's
So it's like tough break. You're still playing with the Oz, man, but it's kind of like going hey, you're starting quarterback, but you're going to be on the bench for the first 5 games or something like that.
You got the job, but sorry,
sport. We're not putting all the eggs in your basket.
Yeah.
It is what it is. It's a session musician. But then you get to join a band like this who is looking for someone to jive with. And I would base it off of the fact that this EP did so well. The songs that were on this EP, that he's probably a full-time member by the time this EP comes out. They're just like, oh, not only is he a good kind of attitude and he fits all of our personalities really well, but he can write and play. I think Jerry quotes it as like, he's the nicest, greatest guy you could ever met, but he writes the darkest, nastiest shit. And like, it's like, okay, I get it. Makes sense.
So to continue off of this tour cycle, they're also get added to the Lollapalooza tour, which of course, obviously it has evolved into something completely different. But at the time, this was a touring festival.
Yes.
I mean, there's some classic lineups that you'd hear. I mean, if you've listened to Henry and Heidi, I love those stories from that
first Lollapalooza tour.
Amazing. This one in '93 took place from June 18th to August 7th of that year. On the main stage, you have Alice in Chains, you got Primus, Dinosaur Jr., Fishbone, Arrested Development, Front 242, Babes in Toyland. Their Tool was on a handful of dates for this, as well as Rage Against the Machine.
I mean, that's as 90s as you can get. Like, that is from every facet. I'm not familiar with Arrested Development, the show or the band. Mm-hmm. And Front 242, again, one of those bands I'm not familiar with, but this makes me want to look into it and see what it is, especially if it was on one of the old Lala tours. Big tour, like you said, major tour for the 90s. Another kind of Ozzy tie-in. Ozzy had either came to the Lollapalooza collaborators and said, hey, I'd like to be on the tour. And they actually told him, no, you're too old. Then Ozfest happens.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yep.
So a lot of Ozzy tie-ins.
Did you guys ever go to Ozfest or any of that stuff? Yeah.
No, that was, I think even Swindle and I are old as dirt, but even the heyday of Ozfest was so many years before we were really like started going to shows. I almost got to go to the 04 one, which was a like Black Sabbath and Judas Priest, like the reunion tour. And then my dad was like, oh yeah, I'm not going to go with you. I'm just going to drop you off and let you go. And my brain was like, holy shit, this could be a lot of fun. His stepwife at the time was basically like, that's probably not the smartest idea to drop a 14-year-old off at this all-day drunk fest where people are drinking in the parking lot at 8 a.m. So needless to say, I didn't go.
My mom went to, I think, 99, which may have been the first time Sabbath played Ozfest. I don't know. But I was only 10, so I wasn't. She didn't even consider it.
We may have to get Swindle's mom on the pod or Will Cronenberg I mentioned earlier. I know both of those. Now I know both of those people have been to Ozfest.
Yeah, my mom would be more fun to have on the podcast than me, probably.
New host.
Guest episode, Mother's Day special.
Just make them talk about heavy metal records that
they've had to suffer us listening to.
God, turn that shit down. On this tour, on the Lollapalooza tour, Jerry Cantrell essentially gets the idea to reach out to Toby Wright. Now, I don't exactly know, maybe you guys can fill me in on this, how or why he wanted to work with Toby Wright, but he called him on tour, was like, hey, we'd like to get together, maybe work, collaborate on something. Let's book a day in the studio. And Toby Wright says, perfect. Yeah. So they set up like 10 days and like after the tour wrapped up and they were supposed to go in the studio. He asked, well, you guys have stuff to work on? Yeah, absolutely. We got plenty of songs to record and write. That was a lie. They didn't have shit. Not a damn thing.
That is one of the best things, right? You know, how many stories in like music have we ever heard where it's like, yeah, I've got 14 songs and like the guy show up and like, no, I got nothing. I just wanted to tie you guys in. I couldn't find anything as to why they reached out to Toby Wright. The guy has like a resume a mile long, but nothing really before this thing that would make me go, that's got to be the reason they like drew it. Maybe there's some album he worked on that I'm not privy to. I know that the 90s were kind of odd. You had all these really strange bands getting signed to major labels. I mean, just with that Lollapalooza, lineup you listed, Rage Against the Machine, Primus, Tool. I mean, those are big bands of that time, but like they're all vastly different bands. They all sound so different.
He worked with Primus. I know he worked on Divine Intervention, the Slayer record.
Yep.
Biohazard.
So he's worked with Metallica. He worked on Korn's biggest record years later, Follow the Leader.
Soulfly.
Did he work with Soulfly?
He did. I don't remember the name of the record. It has like the bird on it or whatever. Yeah. He also worked with Taproot, which Swindle, you made an interesting point off air about Taproot and in comparing this record.
Yeah, the Taproot album came out long, like probably 7 or 8 years after this, but they really took a lot of the like vocal harmonies and stuff that Alice in Chains did. They like made that a big part of their shit. So it makes sense that they went to the same like engineer producer that Alice in Chains used.
For a band like Alice in Chains, that is, I'll dig a little bit more into this at the end of the episode, but for a band that is identified as like a grunge act, Alice in Chains were kind of the fine line between grunge, what became post-grunge, which is even kind of a stranger amalgamation, and like nu metal. Like Alice in Chains predated nu metal, obviously by a couple years. But then like a lot of the post-grunge bands were really influenced by Alice in Chains, right? Nickelback. I mean, I hate, Nickelback, Theory of a Dead Man, Taproot, Shinedown, all of those bands like that. You name it, Chevelle, they're all kind of tied in with that. Those like borderline nu metal, but mainly kind of post grunge bands. They're highly influenced by it, which is wild because that is what's considered butt rock by a lot of people at this day and age. Which that's a term I didn't hear till like 5 years ago. I had no idea what butt rock was. I'm like, oh yeah, radio rock.
Yeah.
But that was a new one for me. But like I remember hearing Taproot as a kid too. That was wild. That one big single
poem.
That has to be it.
That's it.
There was a guy I went to high school with. It was the day after we saw Velvet Revolver on Halloween. We get in her car. She's a couple years older than us. She goes, "Oh, you guys are probably really going to like this." And she puts on that Taproot record. I'd never heard it. Never have listened to it to this day. But I was like, "Oh, yeah, this is fine."
I liked it at the time. I bought the CD. I wouldn't listen to it now.
Hey, I bought the Puddle of Mud Big record when it came out. I was like 9. I bought it. The one with the kid's ass on the front of it or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Yep. I bought that one.
Yeah. I mean, what are you going to do? You don't know any better. It's fine.
Yeah.
I think my brother, I'll say this. I didn't buy it, but I definitely remember Daughtry. That fucking
absolutely.
band.
Yeah.
My brother had that record for sure. I don't know why. He just was like, he should have won. He should have won it all.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and go on record and say that my music taste hasn't gotten any better. I just don't listen to butt rock.
Oh, mine. I think my music taste is great. I'm not going to dog my music taste. I listen to some of the nastiest, like grossest, unintelligible shit, but I fucking love it. Oh yeah, it sounds like some sort of like wildebeest on the microphone. He's not singing words. I know better than that. They're just making that shit up, putting it in the lyric sheet. And that's what's great about Alice in Chains. I can kind of understand what they're saying.
Oh yeah.
It's fantastic. Except for Rotten Apple. I still don't know what the fuck he's saying at the beginning of that song.
Speaking of like this record and being able to kind of pick things out, the record sounds amazing. It sounds great, which is really funny for a band that went into the studio not having really any material prepared, didn't know what they were going to do. From what I understand, they weren't even hell-bent on making a record. They just wanted to take some acoustic guitars into the studio and see what happens. They've been on tour for the better part of like 2 years probably at this point. you're just constantly around loud amplifiers and distorted guitars, the last thing you would want to do is like probably listen to that shit. I mean, it's the same thing when we go to a hardcore metal show and we turn on Hank Williams at the end of the, for the car ride home. Like
ear fatigue.
Any sensible person, would probably just be like, shut that shit off for like a second. I mean, more power to you. If you want to keep it rolling, that's fine. But
it's
I'll
every
probably
so often.
I'll hit you.
Every so often, those late nights that don't happen anymore. You're like, I gotta make this 50-minute drive home. What I gotta put on? Well, I can put on Hank and possibly fall asleep alone at the wheel. Or I could put on more of what I just heard and just like hang my head out the window and hope for dear life.
My option C, there's option A that's Hank something soft. Option B is something disgusting. Option C is something so sad that you'll never go to sleep.
Well, that's just Hank. That's just Hank.
Meets
right
all the
top.
criteria.
There's all three of those.
So they get off the road. They have this studio time booked. Nothing really prepared. Didn't know what they were going to do. They also get evicted from their living arrangements. For some reason, the band were confused about who was supposed to pay rent.
I knew
just
that
didn't
was the
do
story.
it. They just didn't. No, didn't you? You were supposed to send it in. Nobody sent the rent check in, so they don't have a place to live now. So what do? They basically live at the recording studio that they're going to be at, which is London Bridge Studio in Seattle.
That probably made a big difference on what they were going to do in the studio. They were like, oh, we're going to be in the studio for 2 weeks straight because we live there. We might as well write something and record some shit.
I imagine by then they're touring in a bus. Have to be. It's the 90s, right? You can afford that shit. I don't know the monetary gain that they're bringing in, but you've got a record that probably was double platinum by this point. Your first record's probably gold or platinum. Your first EP is probably somewhere around there. So you've probably sold 3 to 4 million records, right? You get home. No one is figuring out who's supposed to pay for room and lodge, right? Didn't think of going like, hey, manager, maybe you should do this while we're out here like just like schlubbing it for 2 years straight. We can barely remember to put shoes on. Why don't you do it? Then they get home. I just picture it. They arrive there and their shit's just on the corner, like just out on the fucking curb. They get home and they're like, well, I mean, there's the studio we booked. We might as well go there. Like, it's still home. We're still in Seattle. It's still sad.
I wonder how, like, the people that ran the studio, how they felt about these nasty motherfuckers living there for like 2 weeks.
Dude, it's a recording studio. They're fine. They're so used to that. They're like, top ramen's in the drawer.
So I would assume since you live there, you have all this time in the world to just write and write. And
I mean, that's their job.
Yeah. From September 7th through the 14th, they would have these long sessions just working on the music, on the record. I guess this was really more or less a way for them to kind of feel out how Mike Inez was going to be, playing and writing with the band. So you have a lot of, this is a lot of early, probably the first stuff that they had actually written with Mike Inez. But I know also that there was a release before the actual EP came out. He was on a soundtrack essentially, right?
The Last Action Hero soundtrack. A little bitter and What the Hell Have I think we're on that. I'm assuming it all came from the same session. More or less. I'm guessing it was all of the stuff was recorded. Certain things were probably meant for this EP. And probably the other 2 songs were recorded for the soundtrack.
So the soundtrack actually, so the songs that were featured on the soundtrack, they were actually songs that were written for Dirt, and they didn't end up on that record. So I'm assuming they just had them lying around. I don't know exactly when they would have recorded them, but I'm pretty sure the songs that they had were just kind of left over from that record, and then they had just Mike probably play on it. So yeah,
but
there you go. So just to kind of go through the lineup here. Of course, we've been talking about a few people. Lane Staley. He's pretty much credited with writing most of the lyrics on the album, although you have Jerry Cantrell, who provides a lot of music. I think he wrote pretty much all the music, even when he was co-writing with people like Mike Inez or Sean Kinney on drums. There's a lot of cool stuff on this record. I mean, there's really just everybody, I feel like, finds a place to shine. There's like songs that are more heavily spotlight the bass, maybe some guitar harmonies. The vocal harmonies on this record, on the record, are just, they speak for themselves. There's so much of it.
Well, you mentioned like who's in the band, Jerry Cantrell, vocals. The song "Don't Follow" I think is one of the cooler tracks on the album, because it's really simple. That's the song that's got harmonica in it, right?
Yeah.
I think that's such a cool thing.
Or is it "Swing on This"? "Swing on This" might have the harmonica on it.
It's one of the other.
It's "Don't Follow."
Okay. "Don't Follow" makes me think of you might have watched it just as reruns, but when in the 90s, my mother was a fan of a show called Northern Exposure, and like the opening of it had like a moose and like all of these like harmonica tracks playing and this kind of weird like northern kind of sound to it, and this track always makes me think of Northern Exposure. What's that?
What was it? Northern Exposure?
The show is called Northern Exposure.
Who's in that?
I couldn't tell you. I've never watched it other than those bits in the 90s.
So is it like a sitcom or what?
Couldn't tell you. I just know it was a television show.
Got it.
And talking about the lineup, you've got Mike Inez like on bass, kind of first full length recording he did with the band, and he's got writing credits in 4 tracks.
Yep.
That's some big deal shit. Like that's not just, okay, we've got a new bass player, he's playing on the album. It's no, we have a collaborator in the band now. Mike has played with Ozzy. He played in Slash's Snake Pit. He went on to play with Heart, I think, during Alice in Chains kind of hiatus, from the late 90s until around 05, 06 when they got back together. So he's got a bit of a catalog to him. Very, very respected player in the world. Very even-keeled player. Kind of adds a different vibe to the band for sure. For a band that's really known for like really heavy riffs, like the bass is always pretty forefront in this band, be it distorted or clean in the mix.
Even before he was in the band.
Oh yeah, Mike Starr you could always hear too. The bass on Dirt and Facelift are fantastic. Obviously the bass on Dirt, the song Wood, is like a big deal, that intro to that song. But he's all over it. But Mike kind of brings this kind of swagger to it with the way he plays. It's a little more rock and roll, I think. A little more just like kind of classic rock and roll to this. And Sean Kinney doesn't really ever get brought up with like drums or like, and he's never brought up as like, oh, he's my favorite drummer. Or you never really hear that. But man, he lays it in. And he's got some creative shit all over these albums. That opening to No Excuses.
Yeah.
With the bongos and everything.
Yeah, there's so many like weird rhythmic there's a lot of weird like rhythms that he includes on that. Yeah, the bongos, like there's so much going on in that track in particular. Yeah, I mean, from the opening song, Rotten Apple, it's the thing I like the most. I mean, we've been talking about, Mike and the bass and, the guitars on this. I mean, you can just hear everything so clear. And the thing that really, like, when I've been listening to it on repeat, the past week or so that we decided that we were going to do this, I mean, the thing that kind of really stuck out to me right from the get-go is like the sustain of everything. You can just hear every note just kind of carry out, like just the rattling of the string. I mean, just everything shows up so clearly. It's so warm, and it's self-produced. Obviously, Toby Wright was the engineer on this. I think this is their only self-produced record as well.
That's correct.
But yeah, I mean, right out of the gate, it is just so. The whole like from that first track to the end, everything just so crystal clear.
I mean, you can hear every instrument, and that may help too for the fact of that it's mostly clean sounding instruments. So you can get really direct sounds. Nothing saturated too much. Definitely sounds like there might be a little bit of chorus on the bass to kind of make it pop a little bit more. Obviously, they're acoustic instruments. It's a mostly acoustic record. I mean, there's definitely some layers in there that are heavy shit.
Oh, sure.
I'm pretty certain that I Stay Away has like some wah, like distorted guitars in it all over it.
There's wah at the end of this first track, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a guitar
Yes.
overlay with wah solo.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's very punchy. It's very clear. But it doesn't sound like an unplugged record, which I like. I thought the unplugged thing was cool until everybody had an unplugged record. Some of those sound better than others. Obviously I think the two most known unplugged albums are this band's and Nirvana's.
Well, don't forget
Hands
the Kiss one. Kiss Unplugged.
Yeah, like I said, this band's and Nirvana's. I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea. Yeah, that's funny. So I had to explain to Lauren that there was a song called "Lick It Up" recently.
Yeah,
and she's like, "Oh, how does it go?" I was like, and I hummed the melody. She goes,
Yeah.
"So that's it?" I was like, "Yeah, that's pretty much
that's
it."
it.
I was like, "It's from their non-makeup era," and I go, "A couple of those dudes, bless their hearts, like, man." She's like, "Oh, interesting," and then we kept going on. It's like, I have that knowledge.
I was pretty bummed. They just played their last maybe show in the Chicagoland area at the Allstate Arena here. And I thought about it. I was like, man, maybe I should go. I've seen this band quite a bit, and they're going to be wrapping up, I think, in New York, and they got like this big thing for it.
How many times have you seen Kiss?
I don't remember. I've seen them quite a bit. I think so. Yeah, not like
wow.
I don't think double digits, but enough where I was like, I don't think double digit. It maybe close to it, but I've seen. There are two bands that I've seen the most. It's Full of Hell and Kiss, and you mentioned Chevelle earlier, and the first time I saw Kiss, they played at Summerfest in Wisconsin, and Chevelle opened for them. They must have just got like thrown on the stage, like, here, this is how we're organizing it.
Remarkable.
And people were pissed. They were not receptive to that band, and they could feel it.
Ain't no Bill Ward.
Ain't no Bill Ward, though. Nutshell, perhaps a really great standout track on this record. Not a single for the record, but definitely a signature Alice in Chains song, perhaps for the album, but also, gets performed at the Unplugged.
It opens the Unplugged record, right?
It does. Yeah, absolutely. So definitely like kind of a highlight performance of the band. Of course, we should mention too that the MTV Unplugged kind of marks that the last time the band would actually perform with Layne. So that's really a lot of the stuff that they did following the EP. They really didn't get to perform too many of these songs together. Some they never performed with each other. And maybe not until like after his passing, until they reformed. Some of those songs just never got performed with Layne.
I was thinking about that too when we started talking about this record, because I've done my own deep dives on this band before just to get the information out.
Yeah.
Basically, if you didn't see them on the Dirt tour, it would have been hit or miss. They had some like opening shows for Kiss at a certain point on their first reunion tour, or their first farewell tour, that they had to bow out of because they were ill. They had to bow out of a tour with Metallica, like in '94, for the touring of this record.
It was the famous tour. It's the shit hit. What is the Sheds
Live
tour?
Shit Binge and Purge.
No, it's
I
got it.
Baba.
It's the Shit Hits the Sheds tour, and basically it was Metallica, Suicidal Tendencies, Danzig, and then I don't remember which of these bands replaced, because I saw some kind of conflicting information on it. So it was either Candlebox or Fight.
Candlebox. It was Candlebox.
Yeah. So Fight, of course, is Rob Halford's band, post Priest, Candlebox. So yeah, they basically were scheduled to do this tour, this huge tour, which was like 51 dates. They even played like Woodstock 94 at the end of it, I think. But they had to do it they had to cancel basically the day before that they were supposed to do it. They cancel all of their dates.
If you go online, and I've seen it throughout the years, there is actually live footage of Metallica like shitting all over this band.
Oh, damn.
Because they had to bail out of the tour, and they're mocking someone shooting up. Like,
oh no.
Like they pulled a Mr. Bungle Red Hot Chili Peppers situation.
God.
They just didn't dress up. That one's a lot funnier.
Alice in Chains kind of prodded the bear. I'm sure Metallica thought they were just like getting Alice in Chains back for Alice in Chains shitting on them.
That was before the Unplugged thing.
Oh,
well, it was the Unplugged thing. I forget.
So on Mike Inez's bass, it has written like, friends don't let friends get friends haircuts. Which was a shot at Metallica.
That's right. Yeah, it's a bummer. I mean, I know even before Dirt, he had been like in and out of rehab. He went to rehab after this came out.
Yes.
And
because he relapsed right before it came out, or right as it was releasing.
And then basically began using again. So essentially that's why they had to cancel the tour. He was just not well enough to do it.
The Unplugged stuff that you saw, or that we've all seen, he's sitting the entire time. Obviously, like his hands are just kind of in his lap. He's in a glove. Like this is just one of those rock and roll rumors. It's rumored that like he lost a finger or something along that because of, infection, whatever it may have been. But who knows? I don't want to dig into this side of the band. That stuff is public knowledge. We know this band had a lot of trouble with a lot of things.
To go back on the touring thing, though, it's like, yeah, if you didn't really see the band on Dirt, I mean, you really weren't going to see them, after the release of this, because basically they canceled that tour and then they kind of went on hiatus for a little while because then Lane did Mad Season for a little bit. Jerry was working. He had basically a bunch of stuff that he was working for a potential solo record, which I think also ultimately ended up being the self-titled record, Alice in Chains.
Yes. Yep.
So he was working with members of the band, and then they were sending like demo tapes to Lane to like write lyrics from. That whole process, it could probably be an episode of its own. Apparently, it was a lot of difficulties there as well.
The recording of that self-titled record was rough.
Yeah. So, but it came out. I love that record too.
That's a cool record.
Yeah, definitely some great tracks on that. But yeah, I mean, basically they were on hiatus forever after that. You mentioned that they recorded a couple singles that ended up on that box set or that compilation, and then he had unfortunately passed away in 2002. So,
we've touched a little bit on Nutshell, that being a fan favorite. That's a track that I know I've heard on the radio. It's not a single. But it's developed enough of a reputation that it's basically a single.
Yeah.
My favorite track on the record is I Stay Away, because the balance of these weirdly like almost major sounding verses and this crazy layered, lush like choruses with that big, powerful vocal line, with the oh my God, the stringed instruments, the orchestrations and everything, legitimate orchestra instruments too, not just like keyboard stuff. I mean, they had the major label behind them and they were spending the money. That is one of the most lush sounding things on this record. The video for it's really cool too, with the puppets, or it's stop motion.
Yeah, well, it's the video directed by Nick Donkin. It's very interesting looking video. It definitely feels of the time. Like I could see this being a Butthole Surfers kind of thing too, like all the weird sort of visual elements that band had.
Primus.
Freaked, of course. Yeah, a lot of stop motion stuff in that.
My favorite part of the video is when it just does like the super dramatic like light shifting on the puppets.
Yeah,
like they're just normal humans.
I was kind of looking into this guy's like why this dude, like why did they reach out to Nick Donkin for this video? And he had done like a short film, like a Christmas film, The Junkie's Christmas, which is, I guess, a William S. Burroughs short story. And so he had done basically a similar thing with puppets and stop motion, where William S. Burroughs is like narrating it. He also stars in it. And then I found also, I guess there's the William S. Burroughs and Kurt Cobain collaboration, where they basically take this story, this like short story, and it's like a spoken word thing where William S. Burroughs is like kind of speaking over Kurt, just kind of going wild over a guitar track. It's like only a 9-minute like spoken word song.
Fight tuberculosis, folks. Christmas Eve, an old junkie selling Christmas seals on North Park Street. The priest, they called him. Fight tuberculosis, folks.
Yeah, but the video is very odd looking, and it, kind of makes sense, I guess. Very of the time.
Because this was this was technically the second single off the album.
It is. It's also the first one they wrote with Mike as well. This was like the first mark of that. But yeah.
I saw some video that said that Mike wrote the riff, the verse part. It's very intricate. It's a very intricate fucking
that bass line is, if he are saying he wrote the bass line,
the guitar riff.
Really?
The guitar riff. Yeah.
That's wild shit. Again, he's kind of like the hidden weapon on this EP, it seems. He came in, probably was like, just like these guys, it'll be fun, and then like wrote, a third or a 25% of this like EP that became, a 6-time platinum, 5-time platinum release.
Yeah.
My favorite song in the EP, hands down.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Alice in Chains like singles of all time.
Yeah. A lot of people felt that way too, because it was definitely made the charts. Reached number 10 on the mainstream rock tracks chart. Stayed there for 26 weeks. Mm-hmm. And this is a song we kind of mentioned earlier. This song was never played with Lane Staley. This was never made it to a live performance with Lane.
I was going to say probably a hard song to recreate because of all the layers and the lush kind of sounds in the chorus parts.
Dylan, you would be happy to know, or you probably do, but I don't know if you remember this episode of Beavis and Butthead where they watched the video of this. And
I remember a lot of that series, but I don't remember this one. Like, I can remember all the Guar stuff. I can remember when they're making fun of Danzig for the Can't Speak video. Obviously, I remember, damn it, Pantera, this beer's warm. Like, I remember all that, but I don't remember this one. Yeah. I saw this, was like, shit, how do I not remember it?
It's an interesting one.
Hey man, I got that box set. I can bring that thing out and just watch it whenever I want.
Absolutely.
It's 2023. You can't just bring that thing out whenever you want to.
God.
So then we have No Excuses. We kind of mentioned that there's a lot rhythmically going on in this track with the bongos.
All right, song. It's okay.
It's like your favorite Alice in Chains song, isn't it there, bud?
Yeah, it is. Definitely.
Swindle bongos immediately.
That fucking bass line is one of my favorite bass lines of all time. Ever. Can you keep doing that for the rest of the
episode? This is the cool one. It has like Lane and Jerry both doing kind of the harmonies as well. It's definitely a kind of standout for their performance together as well. It was written by Jerry. It was a song written by Jerry musically, I guess.
The band's first number 1 charting single.
Yep.
The only one with Lane.
Yep. Yeah, because they would not repeat this until like 2009.
That's wild.
Check My Brain.
Because the song, I was going to bring that up. Like the song that did it again is like on the opposite end of the spectrum for this band. It's like one of the heavier singles they've ever done. That's wild. And that's a Jerry, I think Jerry sings the bulk of that song.
Dude, Jerry's rad as fuck.
I can go on record saying he's one of my favorite guitar players of all time. Just like the guy's got a sound to him that's very much like parts Eddie Van Halen, parts Elton John, parts Tony Iommi. Like it's all in his playing. I can hear it.
It's the playing, and then he's no slouch on the vocals too. I mean, one of my favorite songs, and I think this would probably be the same for Swindle too. One of my favorite songs that band has ever written is fucking Stone. And he's singing it like it's so good.
I don't know how many times Swindle have I been in a room somewhere and we've been like,
just
Stone,
resort to fucking knuckle dragon caveman. Oh, aga booga.
Oh, ta. Oh.
This song is definitely on my gym playlist.
God,
for sure.
It's what a band to show that, like, 93, you have a chart topper, right? And then 15 fucking years later, band resurgence, new vocalist, going through all this stuff. You got another number one that pops up. It also shows too how like weird the chart, like musical charts were at the time. This band probably by this point had sold 6 million records total, maybe. Only one number one charting single. This is their first number one like release.
This is the first EP that debuted at number one in the history of Billboard charts.
That's
only
crazy.
Combated by 2 others.
Yeah,
one
like later
since.
on.
Yep, since, yes. 04 was the Linkin Park Jay-Z EP, like the mashup.
Sure.
And Collision Course is what it was called. And then years later, in like 2011, was an EP from a group called Bad Meets Evil, which I think is like Eminem and Royce da 5'9",
okay,
or something like that.
Is that right?
I mean,
Swindle?
I'm sure there have been EPs that have
yes.
debuted since then and have debuted that just weren't listed on there.
But this is a feat. Yeah, I mean, this was crazy for that to just make history like that.
This was like the height of this band. I mean, if you look at like the legacy of this band, so Facelift in 90, toured for that. Sap 92, Dirt 92. This comes out in 93. Self-Titled comes out in 95.
No, 90.
And then Unplugged comes out in 95.
This came out in 94.
This came out. That's right. It came out in January. Close enough enough. What I'm getting at is like all of these records came out in the matter of like 6 years. Right. All of it. This whole band's like first part of its career came out in a 6-year fucking period. Most of it they couldn't tour off of. And all of this great material is coming out during that. And there's also like B-sides and stuff that came out on the box set years later. It's like, not only is Jerry Cantrell a great guitar player, he's a good songwriter. He pairs himself really well with really good songwriters as well. I think Mike Inez down the line is going to be known as another good contributor to the Alice in Chains songwriting catalog.
Well, speaking of songwriting and kind of writing these like wonderful passages of music, Whale and Wasp, the instrumental track on the album.
Those harmonies on that thing.
It's crazy. You have the kind of acoustic underbelly going on in the background, but then, all of these like wild, just wonderful guitar harmonies and solos written all over this. I mean, all the details on guitar. I don't know if we really talked about it. I mean, we've talked about it broadly, but some of like just like those lick lines that he is writing just are so effective for this song.
Those are some sludge kind of guitar harmonies in there. Those are akin to like some of the early 90s, like, Crowbar records or anything. When I first heard them years ago, I always thought they sounded like Orion, like some of the larynx in Orion. With that, it's got that same effect, almost as like that weird bass solo at the end of Orion's, like 4-layered basses or something. It's all these crazy harmonies. Definitely gets that vibe to it. Like, He knows harmonies and he's one guitar player. Like it's great.
There's also, I think this song also has kind of the classical kind of the violins also playing as well, which I think I had read or heard in one of like the videos that we watched in research for this, that, usually if you invite some classically trained musicians, you have like charts prepared for them. He basically sat with them in a room and just kind of worked through what he wanted, like basically kind of got a feel for it out, which, that's not, I'm not a classically trained musician or hardly a musician at that, but, usually those people do not kind of, it's not so, it's a little bit more professional in that way.
So it's funny to bring that up because I think And it's the song that I will never admit that exists. It's Nothing Else Matters. There's obviously all of these like orchestrated parts in that. And Hetfield had to sit down with all the like, you know, all these legit musicians, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and they're like, where are the charts? He's like, I'm playing this weird fret here.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but go for it.
Yeah.
You know, kind of thing. Like, it's so fun to see, like, hear about like rock and roll musicians going in with like, you know, symphony musicians and just going, oh, okay, we're, this
Write
is a
something
thing.
cool.
Yeah. Hey man. Oh yeah. That little twiddly dee thing you got going over there. It's a piccolo, sir.
Don't Follow. Yeah. Don't
Love
Follow up next. Third single for the record, also written by Jerry.
No video for it.
No video. We had a couple videos. I think maybe missed No Excuses had a video, but yeah. Don't Follow, third single, no video. I think Jerry sings most of the song in the first half. Lane takes over towards the bridge and kind of follows the end. You also have the backing vocals of the band, Mike Inez. There's also Jerry's guitar tech.
I love
also
that.
Provides
I love
vocals.
that.
Hey, he's around. Just get him. We need another voice on this thing.
That's a very Dimebag Darrell-esque thing of like, you know, the guitar techs and all the technicians are involved. They're basically part of the band. It's like, hey, we've got the same techs for 20 years. Like, yep, they're just part of the band now. Put them on a record. Probably ended up getting paid for it.
I hope. Another song that was not performed with Lane. It wouldn't be performed live until the reunion shows around like 2000.
Is this the track that's used as a tribute to Lane that plays, or is that Nutshell?
No, Nutshell.
That is Nutshell? Yeah. Okay.
But a great track nonetheless. And then we kind of end with Swing on This, which kind of, it opens with a very like just a walking bass, taking the thing for a walk. It's very jazzy, very bluesy, but then it's also kind of, paired with these like very gritty kind of, I don't know, I guess grungy passages of like, there's vocal harmonies over this thing. Mike Inez definitely takes the spotlight on this track for me. When I heard it, like re-listening to it,
God, I hope you're about to touch on what I thought of too.
So it reminded me of, because it's a weird one I think it's the weirdest track on the EP. It just kind of, more or less the beginning of it feels kind of a little, I don't want to say out of place, but it's a different vibe from most of the songs on the record.
Yeah, there's a swing to it that's not all over the record.
And it reminded me of like, Van Halen during like the Diamond David Lee Roth era. They would usually have like a very weird track on a record. You have like Ice Cream Man is kind of a weird one because it's like acoustic bluesy kind of thing. Happy Trails, Big Bad Bill, Could This Be Magic? These are like very like weird outlier tracks that, you write a record for your fans who are just, hard rock fans. And then you have the one for us. We just wanted to be fucking weird as shit, get Eddie Van Halen's dad playing, piccolo or whatever it is on a track.
Hey, babe, want a beer?
That's a great story.
What I can't remember, I make up. Wow.
Wow. Is he in the room with us?
God.
It's a good one, but yeah, it definitely reminded me of that, just kind of like those weird fringe kind of Van Halen tracks.
It's something I like about records too, especially if it's like a really good record and you get that one weird track and it works. Some bands do it, doesn't fit. Pantera's Far Beyond Driven, #1 album, has that track in the middle of it, Good Friends and a Bottle of Pills, which didn't work. I fucking love that track. Swindle and I have argued over this for years. I think it's a great track.
I think it stinks.
I think it's just nasty sounding, but it obviously doesn't work in comparison.
It's nasty sounding, all right.
It obviously doesn't work in comparison to the rest of the album, which is pretty flawless. Whereas like a track like this is just weird enough that it makes sense because it's still got those weird vocals on it, those kind of like nasty sounding Lane Staley vocals on it. So it's completely fitting. It also makes me kind of think of the territories Lane would go with like Mad Season a little bit. Which I'm not near as familiar with that band at all.
It's cool. It's not I think a lot of people.
It makes me think of the Temple of the Dog stuff. Kind of just like if you want to listen, it's there.
It's cool. I know it was also a very difficult record to make, And I don't think it's like a perfect record, but it's cool, like that it happened. I would recommend checking it out if you haven't. But this track also ends with the they're kind of wrapping up in the studio or something. It's like, that sounds pretty fucking good. Love it. We kind of mentioned that the reception from this record was huge. It became the first EP in music history to chart number 1. It sold more than 140,000 units in the United States within its first week.
That's an EP. That's not a full-length record. That's an EP selling that. That's wild shit.
Yeah, nominated for 2 Grammys in 95, Best Recording Package and Best Hard Rock Performance for I Stay Away. So it was double platinum in its first year, triple platinum in 95, quadruple platinum in 2022. This thing, it's still to this day. Often people look at Dirt, but this is probably not far behind it.
They're kind of like companion pieces, right? Dirt came out in 92. This obviously came out 2 years later, but was recorded at the tail end of the Dirt tour. So it's almost, it feels like a companion piece. Like you could listen to those two and just go, yep, this is one solid piece of music. Whereas maybe Facelift matches up with Sap a little bit. And that self-titled record's kind of its own thing. It's a little bit more polished. The songs are maybe a little bit more thought out on that one, less from the gut, maybe a little bit more planned out on that one. Great record, not knocking it. Just it's vast. It sounds different than those other earlier records. But like platinum success, lots of touring in their early years, massive records. Maybe that's where some of the troubles came from, right? This band sadly was plagued with a lot of that throughout the years and suffered a lot of tragedies, and a big tragedy later on with the passing of Lane Staley in 2002. I was watching MTV when the first report hit. I remember watching it. And he died, if I remember right, he died like really close to the anniversary of Cobain's death. Something like that, like all those years later.
It was in April for sure.
Yeah. Oh, it absolutely was. There's a story, which if you get the time, you can look at Lane's final interview. It's on paper and it's not an easy read. It's pretty depressing. But a band that you thought would have ended in like 95, last record's out, they did a couple singles, and lo and behold, Jerry gets clean, gets the guys back together and puts out another kind of like classic record for them, which is Black Fades Away to Blue. I'm sure I'm butchering that title, but it's got Check My Brain on it, which is classic by this point. And they're still going, their most recent album is Rainier Fog, which came out, I think, 2018. And they really haven't done much since. Jerry's put out solo work that's been really cool. Like if you really want to hear like some cool guitar shit, he's got some stuff on those solo records that are something else. His most recent being Brighton. Really cool stuff. I think Toby Wright's worked with him on all of those as well. So great EP. Kind of debatable if it's actually an album or an EP because of its length. Big seller for the band, helped the band achieve even more of a legendary status. I've, muttered along and, rambled on about how much I enjoy this thing I love this band. This is one of my favorite bands of all time. On my like, are they a grunge band? Yes. I think this is the band that defines grunge the most. When I think of like,
interesting. When
I think of the number one grunge record, I think of Dirt. I think of Dirt. I think when it comes to grunge bands, I am vehemently it goes Alice in Chains. It goes Tad. It goes Soundgarden. It goes Nirvana. And that's it for me. I don't put Pearl Jam up there. And like, arguably, if I had to put someone maybe, in number 5, it would be a really hard set to put somebody in number 5 for me.
I don't know. It's like kind of a weird question, right? Like, what is grunge really? Because I think we've also discussed before that you know, I think it's more of a way to describe a movement of music in itself and like a style and aesthetic. But none of these bands really sound the same.
None of them.
Which is so funny to me because it's like, oh, grunge, you know, I mean, you can make some ideas of it. I think they are not my favorite, but I think to me, Pearl Jam probably encapsulates that whole sound. Like to me, are they most like, if I'm just thinking traditional grunge within itself, like the definition of it, I think of that band. Whereas this band sounds more like a metal band to me. Soundgarden sounds more like a metal band to me as well. You know, yeah, Tad's great. You know, I guess you could kind of lump the Melvins in there as well. They're their own weird fucking thing, but
kind of like the B-side of My War. You could lump that in there as well.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap up talking about this album, I wanted to, you mentioned they got nominated for best packaging for the album.
Yeah.
They like really went in on Flies for the artist of this album.
Oh my God.
Go. Of course, the title is Jar of Flies.
Yeah.
The CD itself is just a humongous, like the whole thing is a fly. Apparently in like when it was first released, there was the spine of the CD case, the like jewel case had plastic flies.
That's
in
crazy.
The spine of it.
Oh my God.
That's so weird.
Yeah, they took that theme and ran off with it.
Cause it's like his science project, right? Like from third grade.
Yeah. I heard something about that.
Something about that.
I think Jerry's from Oklahoma. I'm pretty sure he's from Oklahoma. So this all makes that much more sense now.
Also, this was, I think, one of the first like enhanced CDs.
I think you're right.
Austin looks confused.
I am
enhanced CD.
No, just for the audience, because I know what it is, but for the people at home.
An enhanced CD was a CD that you could put in your CD-ROM player of your computer.
What are those?
And or your disk drive, and it would play music videos and like clips that were just included on the CD. And apparently, like this didn't the enhanced CDs lasted until like the early 2000s, but like really early ones like this one included like a drive disc, like inside the CD case under the CD there was a separate disc that you like had to install on your Windows computer to be able to watch these music videos.
I remember I bought one early in the 2000s. It was Good Charlotte's big record, The Young and the Hopeless. It was an enhanced CD. You had to put it in there, load, like the disc itself was a drive disc, but it still played music, but you would have to load it in there, load this software up on it, and basically you could listen to the album and I think watch one video.
Damn.
When we saw Converge, Dylan, when I bought the CD of Petitioning the Empty Sky, then that was an enhanced CD in like 2009.
Yeah.
It had like the video for The Saddest Day and something else.
I think, and to add to this enhanced CD thing, I believe this was one of the first CDs that were protected as well. Like you couldn't copy it.
Oh.
I think this was one of those things too. They started doing that with CDs as well because CD, I'm assuming like early versions of CD copiers or burners were coming out at that point. And I'm sure like, Sony, BMG or Columbia were like, we have to stop this. We're not going to sell any records. And they were kind of right, but Evil Empire, fuck them. But they would basically make it that the CDs would only work in certain things. And it was hilarious. Like I distinctly remember attempting to play CDs in my PS2 that I had just to listen to it. And the PS2 would be like, yeah, we can't read this disc, but I'd put it in like a boombox or something. And it'd work just fine. It was like, yep, it's protected.
Well, this record, this EP, it definitely showcases a band like kind of at the top of their game with problems and all. Like they just really could do anything they wanted to. Like obviously they could be the heavy band. They could write all of the more traditional riffs, but then you could just kind of like mess around for like a couple weeks and, write this wildly diverse, with all the layers and guitar harmonies and vocal harmonies. You could put out a record like this and it still just do fucking gangbusters.
now's the time that we typically go over the things that we've been listening to over the last week. My first pick is an album from the band called Lamp of Murmur. I didn't realize, I guess this came out sometime earlier in the year. Didn't get a chance to listen to it. And I saw the artwork and it's pretty bonkers. It's obviously a very black metal record, in the vein of like Immortal though. Like it's got that kind of sizzly, kind of fried sounding guitar sound. I wish it had Abbott singing on it because that dude is just fucking great. But this thing is really good. It's a quick listen. It's like 40 minutes long. It's called Saturnian Bloodstorm. I don't know the record label it necessarily came out on, but this thing is a hell of a listen. A lot of fucking fun. And not like a standard kind of like, scream at a wall black metal record. On that though, another record I want to mention came out a few days ago. I have not had a chance to fully listen to this record because it is so dense and so long. It's a 75-minute record. It's the newest Panopticon album, The Rhyme of Memory. Came out on Bend Ruin Recordings. This guy's a Kentucky native. I believe he lives in Minnesota now. He put out an album about 10 years ago called Kentucky. It's black metal, has very American sounding black metal at that. Has aspects of like bluegrass music and traditional stringed instruments. And it's really fucking cool. But if you want to be real sad and real depressed while you hear banjo and mandolin for an hour and some change, give it a listen. I'm hoping to fully dig into that tomorrow. And the last release I've been listening to is the most recent. So there's Hank Sr., there's Hank Jr., which we don't claim. There's Hank the Third, and then there's his son. He's in a band called Four in the Strange Band, and they just put out their sophomore record called Hangdog. I believe it came out on Shooter Jennings' record label. Really cool record. His first record's got elements of like doom metal to it. This one's a little bit more straightforward country. But it's really rad. Guy's got a cool voice. Does kind of like a quiver thing when he sings. Just really cool country record. But that's what I've been listening to.
I've been listening to a few things. At the time of recording this, the Full of Hell and Nothing collaboration titled When No Bird Sang is out now through Closed Casket Activities. Lots of different sounds and influences on this record. I don't think either of these bands have really been one to kind of stay in a particular genre, which is super cool. They've kind of made this almost, hybrid band together. And, Full of Hell is not one to shy away from a collaboration. They've done things with The Body. They've done things with Primitive Man. Actually, that was earlier this year.
Man, that thing was rad.
That was pummeling. This is great. This has definitely, it starts out kind of similarly, like in that it has a bunch of just great riffs on it, the first track. And then it kind of goes into more of a shoegazy territory. There's like ambient soundscapes. It's really kind of the full package. And I've been really enjoying it today when it came out on the time of recording this, but definitely a good recommendation, I think. Also, at the time of recording this EP by Chained to the Bottom of the Ocean came out. It's like 3 new songs, consumed by the Vitriol of Life. I've been really enjoying that today as well. It is out now through Red Scroll Records. I don't know if this was like a surprise release. I didn't really see anything for it, but I'm definitely pleasantly surprised to hear some new stuff from them as well. My last thing, I recently learned of the passing of Shane McGowan, who is the frontman for the Pogues. I am not typically a person who really likes like Celtic punk stuff. Like I never really got into some of the stuff that probably came out after the Pogues. But I really like the delivery and just the way that they write, kind of taking traditional Celtic Irish music and putting it into a more like rock and roll type punk thing. I've been listening to If I Should Fall from Grace with God, that was released in 1988. It's definitely one of my favorite records by that band. So just kind of a fun thing to kind of dive back into, and in light of everything that happened. I think he was like 65. So
yeah, he's I don't know much about the band, but I know I've seen him and seen his interviews a lot. And I believe there's an interview between he and Bruce. I believe.
Oh, really?
I believe there's some footage kind of floating around that I've seen of both of those guys because he was obviously a big fan and supporter of like some of the Irish style punk bands and like Celtic style punk bands.
My first rec is a single that just came out a couple days ago by Chelsea Wolfe called Ton of Lights. This is their third single from, I'm assuming it's going to be a full length that comes out next year.
Already got that pre-order, bud.
And there's a video for that song too. There's birds and crows and general goth stuff, as Chelsea Wolfe would have. And my my other rec is Don't Test the Pest by Pest Control. It came out earlier this year. I recommended it to y'all personally earlier this week, but it's thrashy kind of crossover, hardcore, maybe like DRI type shit, but like the songs are longer than like DRI.
Definitely got like a Walls of Jericho vibe on the vocals a little bit. I know that's a little bit more metalcore, but a very upset woman singing. So like it was very cool. Quick listen too, like 20 minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe 20 and some change.
The album artwork is hilarious too.
I love that. It makes me think of a Goosebump cover. I believe there's one where like these praying mantises were eating a town, which I thought was great. This has to be Del Gribble's favorite album. Has to be. Don't mess with the pest. Like rip Johnny Hardwick, but like, come on.
But Dale did test the pest constantly.
Many times.
Yeah.
That's all we got for this week. You've been listening to Riff Worship. We'll be back with a couple more episodes this year. We got some stuff in store for you. You can always follow us at Distortion891 for any updates on this show, as well as our live show, Vocal Distortion, which airs on Monday from 6 p.m. Central. For Swindle, myself, and the Dillbozer, you've been listening to Riff Worship.